Russian authorities last week raided the homes of Falun Gong practitioners, a group heavily persecuted by the Chinese communist regime. This comes amid Russia's closer relationship with communist China. Earlier, I spoke with Ambassador Sam Beraunbach, co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Summit, about the persecution. Ambassador Beraunbach, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Well, my pleasure to join you.
Now, Russia has raided the homes of Falun Gong practitioners. This is following China's lead, where the spiritual practice is persecuted. How does this fit into the rising threats against religious freedom around the world by the Chinese regime?
Well, it's another piece of it. We saw this most dramatically recently in Nicaragua, where the Ortega regime had really let alone the Catholics and the evangelicals until they had built a stronger relationship with China. They had moved from recognizing Taiwan to China. And then not 6 months later, they started arresting Catholic priests, throwing the bishops in jail, kicking evangelical pastors out. And so this is the continuation of China's war on faith. And so now what you're seeing in Russia hasn't really messed all that much with the Falun Gong practitioners in the past. And all of a sudden you're seeing these raids taking place of peaceful people not doing anything but practicing Falun Gong practitioners. And now they get thrown in jail and harassed and harangued. And it's a reach. This is the reach of China further going forward in their war on faith.
On that note, even here in the U.S., there are reports of the Chinese regime going after dissidents, Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, all of these different types of faith. Now, what is the extent of the Chinese regime's transnational repression, and what's the best way for countries to stand up against that?
What's extensive? I shared with the example of Nicaragua. We're now seeing it more in Russia. Any country that's aligned with China in this axis of evil, and they're the lead country in the axis of evil, they're going to push their transnational agenda on them, and particularly in this area, going after the faith community, because they believe, I think, they believe that the faith community is one of the key groups or components that could actually take them down and cause them real trouble. And so they go after the faith community almost stronger than any place else. I mean, they started with the Tibetan Buddhists in China. They are after the Uyghurs, the Christians, and have been after very aggressively Falun Gong for a long period of time. I just think this is part and parcel of the axis of evil that becomes closer and closer knit together in its operations. And now you're going to see more and more of this religious persecution as part of the operational methods and means of the axis of evil directed by China.